So I'm very excited to tell you, as if you didn't already know, that our guest this evening is Philip Hoare. I'm just going to talk briefly about Philip and what will happen this evening, and then I'll hand you over to Philip himself, who's going to tell us a little bit about his book. So Philip is the author of a really impressively diverse number of books on people such as Noel Coward, Oscar Wilde, Albrecht Dürer, and subjects including whales, of which he is very passionate about. I think one of his best known books is Leviathan or the Whale. And as you'll see, the idea of Leviathan and whales ties in very much into his new book as well, which is what we're here to talk about, which is has the amazing title of William Blake and the Sea Monsters of Love. I told this title to a friend, and he said, "That's a really good title. It sounds well prog," which I think is very true. So just to let you know what's going to happen this evening, in a moment, Philip's going to come on screen and I think he's going to do a sort of 20-minute or so presentation about the book. And then I'll pop back up and Philip and I will talk for perhaps about the same amount of time about many of the ideas and stuff in the book. And then probably about halfway through proceedings, we're going to open it up to a general Q&A for all of you fine people. And when it gets to that point, you can find the raise hand icon, hopefully in the bottom of your screen. But if you get stuck, just wave your actual hand, presuming you have one, and we'll try and spot you as well. And we'll invite you up onto the screen to ask questions. But that's all a little way away. So right now, if I could invite Philip to turn on his camera and his microphone and speak to us, I'll invite him to lay out his stall, as it were. Over to you,
Hi.
Philip.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in from around the world, especially my friend John Gullett, all the way from New England. Hello, John. I've just seen his name up there. And anyone else who is, as I'm saying hello to everyone. So, yeah, so I'm just going to read a little bit, which is sort of the intro to the book, just to sort of set the tone. So if we could have the first slide, please. I think it'll probably be the second slide, actually, because we've that's the ad for the book. So in the book, this image is accompanied by this short piece. Adam lies sprawled on the shore. The rocks are washed green by the sea. His newborn body is spread-eagled, arms outstretched. He doesn't know what he's for. There's a serpent already wrapped around his legs. The pain of creation is on his face. You can see it in the whites of his eyes. God flies over the abyss, bestowing the sentence of humanity. His holy hand held over Adam's fiery head. After all the storms and the planets and the seas, all the whales and the birds and the trees, he decided to make this beautiful creature out of earth and water to hold dominion over them all. God's wings, who made them? Who took the picture? Spread out of his shoulders like a cape. He's a swan or a dove. The new dawn is fading. There are dark clouds in the rosy sky. God knows what he has done. The anguish is in his face. It's too late. There's no escape. Adam is already abandoned, stranded on the rocks. Something the tide left behind. So I came across that image in this amazing 1944 Faber gallery, which was written by Geoffrey Keynes, who's a great Blakean hero of the 20th century. And that image is just, I hadn't really seen it before. It's in the Tate, obviously. And this wonderful book's full of plates. It's for a wartime audience on brown utility paper. What is Blake doing in the Second World War? What is he doing anywhere? He's kind of like Doctor Who, isn't he? He kind of just like pops up and he does the business. Keynes is a really interesting person. He comes into my book quite a bit. Um, but one of the things I was really keen to talk about tonight is just to explain, not to explain the title, which I maintain came to me in a dream, but um, it has a direct relationship to something else, which we'll get to at the end. I'm sure you probably know it anyway, but I'll leave you guessing, but you probably don't need to guess very much. So I came again through Blake through many ways. For most of my life, I lived in Hackney, in Hoxton, and also near Broadway Market, E8. And when I walked into London, I walked over Blake's grave every day. Of course, I didn't know where his grave was. We didn't do it at that point. Went to live in London in 1979, and I kind of felt I was treading on his dreams. I kind of felt guilty about this, and I didn't. I knew a bit about Blake, but he's there, isn't he? He's just there. He just hovers there, really. And then when I started to write this book, which came to me in a very tangential way, I won't really go into it, but suffice to say, I started writing an entirely different book, and Blake just came in and took it over. I mean, literally took it over. It was a really extraordinary thing. I didn't intend to write about Blake at all, but he just took over. And one of the things that brought me in from a modern angle, from my lifetime point of view, is the work of Derek Jarman. So if we could have the next slide, please, Ian. And Jarman's first narrative short film, so the first Super 8 film he made, which wasn't just like people wandering around his warehouse studio down on Butler's Wharf, was this film which he called At Low Tide. And these are 4 stills from the film. It's only 6 minutes long. And it has this amazing 70s quality of saturated colour, kind of fantastical, kind of glam rock. That specific first image you see is Andrew Logan, who's the person who started the alternative Miss World in Downham Road in Hackney E8, close to where I lived. I wasn't there at that point. That was in 1971, 72. And he's dressed as a kind of sea god. And then the boy lying in a rock pool is someone called Ian. We don't even know who he was. He was probably picked up by Derek Jarman in a nightclub the night before. And they piled in a van together with this woman who is in the third sequence looking over the drowned sailor, who is the siren. The alternative title of this film is The Siren and the Sailor. She's a woman called Benthe Loos, who later on became a very respectable and very honoured modern architect in Finland, from Denmark, where she was from. And she's just wearing a net. I think her name should be Annette. Sorry about that. But and then the last sequence is the sea god with the siren, and the end of the film is he embraces her and they go off into the sea and just sort of vanish. And it felt Blakean to me. I couldn't put my finger on it, why it was, but I knew that Jarman was an absolute Blake aficionado. In fact, his last film, Blue, which is just a blue screen, he was fatally ill from his HIV infection, quotes Blake. And then I realised that these are elements taken from Blake, and it's took me into Blake again because of the way the sea is portrayed in Blake. So if we could have the next slide, please, Ian. So that's the drowned sailor is that drowned figure from Dante. It's almost the same pose. It's quite clear where Jarman was taking these images from. He was actually restaging a Blake image in many ways. And then that took me to looking at how Blake depicts the sea. And it's a really interesting way, partly because at the center of his very tumultuous life, for someone who didn't really go outside London, he had a very tumultuous life because of what's in his head. And Jacob Bronowski said Blake saw what he imagined. I think that's a great way of looking at his visions. I mean, as we all know, he spent this 3 years slumber by the ocean in Felpham. And I just imagine him, they arrive in those 16 boxes and trunks, and Blake and Catherine Blake and their Blake's sister, also called Catherine, and they establish themselves in this wonderful cottage, thatched cottage. Many of you have been there, I'm sure. Still there, very much the same. And their bedroom window looking out to the sea. So Blake's eyes stretch. I mean, he wouldn't often see the horizon. He would go out walking, obviously, to Hampstead Heath and the Surrey, towards the Surrey Hills. But that sense, after you've been in a city for a long time, or town, you get on the train, you're going through the countryside, and you get to the sea, or even before that, your eyes stretch towards the horizon. And Blake was long-sighted. I had the benefit of having his spectacles held up to my eyes in the Fitzwilliam Museum when I was writing the book. And so he's long-sighted. He needs spectacles to see far away, not close up. So suddenly he is there. He's interacting with the sea. The two Catherines bathe in the sea, embraced by Neptune, as Blake puts it in a letter to Thomas Butts, and he feels freed by this extraordinary element, which is visible from his house. And so next slide, please, Ian. So I started to look at the way that the sea is portrayed in Blake's work, and this fantastic image from America, A Prophecy, which really, I think, speaks to the sense that Blake knew Coleridge, but I think, you have elements of the slimy things lying at the bottom of the sea, and that image of the drowned man, again with the serpent around his legs, the sea monstrous fish and the sea snakes, and also elements of the Tempest, of course, which is a big inspiration to Coleridge. And for Fathom Fire, though father lies, of his bones are cold made. Those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing but him that doth fade. So that made me think about where the sea sat in the artistic imagination at that point, because the sea, when he was at Felpham, he's next door to Bognor Regis. Bognor Regis is already a resort. It's a spa town. It's like Tunbridge Wells or Bath or Southampton, actually. People are going there to take the waters. So you have the sea as this recreational thing, but also in the Byronic, roll on the dark blue ocean, a terrifying place. So Blake is between these two places in Felpham. And that really, to me, fascinates me in one particular way because of the way Blake drew the natural world. So can we have the next slide, please, Ian? And I'm jumping now right fast forward to his last address, far from the sea. It's where he ends up, 3 Fountains Court, overlooking the Thames. He and Catherine are reduced to just 2 rooms. I think they're very happy there. I mean, he's aging now. He's been working on the book of Job. But I think he knows where he's going at last. I think, in a way, there's something really beautiful about his end and the way it's sort of curated. But what I think is very interesting about this address and his portrayal of the animal world is that the most famous animal he did portray very strongly was the tiger. And the tiger that he drew in the poem is a kind of tigerish, sort of cuddly creature, and people have sort of ridiculed him. This man could never have seen a tiger. Well, can we have the next slide, please, Ian? Directly across the road from number 3 Fountains Court, literally directly across the road, is this building, the Exeter Exchange, the Royal Menagerie. In the first floor of this building are housed, next slide, please. I have to get my book out because I can't read it. Are housed a full-grown lion, a lioness, a Bengal royal tiger, an elegant leopard. Is there any other kind? A laughing hyena, 3 large oriental porcupines, the margay, 2 great white polars, 2 polar bears, an elephant, which is every Sunday taken for a walk down the Strand, accompanied by zebra to advertise the menagerie, a male nigau, sadly, a famous sambu, which is a human being. Previous to this poster, 2 Ethiopians had been exhibited in one of those cages. And then right at the very end, and you won't be able to read this, I'm sure, from the point if you get the book or you look online, the very last line, the tiniest bottom line, it's like that optician's thing, the thing you can't read at the bottom. The enormous skeleton of a spermaceti whale, 60 foot long. It's totally hilarious that the biggest thing in the room is given this line. I mean, that's a big thing and a big animal, you know, and they had a long gallery, so this whale's bones must have been spread out along there. And that made me think about the way Blake portrayed the Leviathan, because he portrays the Leviathan as a sea serpent. You know, that was the Leviathan of Paradise Lost. Of course, it's the first animal that appears in Paradise Lost. It's the Leviathan of the Bible, obviously. And it's seen as a sea snake. And that's how often Blake will depict it. So next slide, please, Ian. Sorry, Jeff, this is just to reinforce the fact that this is a page from Blake's notebook in the British Library. Absolutely accurate image of a tiger. Close up too. Such beautiful images. So, right, and obviously these are drawn after he has written from the Tiger of the poem. He's illustrated that, but it sort of puts light to the fact that Blake couldn't accurately draw animals. I think that the crouching tiger is like a hokusai print. I think it's such a beautiful image. But so next slide, please, Ian. And of course, the great image that he created, one of the great images he created at Fountains Court in the last years of his life, where the book was the Book of Job. This is the John Linnell coloured version. And this is the behemoth battling with Leviathan. And Leviathan is a snake, a sea serpent. The behemoth is a kind of cross between a hippopotamus, an elephant, and goodness knows what. I think it's quite clear that Blake is drawing on Albrecht Dürer's rhinoceros. It's the same format, the same way it fits the kind of medallion format. Dürer very keen on natural history. Dürer much collected by Blake. Dürer's print Melancholia, the ungendered angel of melancholy, the last print hanging in Blake's room when he died. He'd sold off all the rest of his antique prints. So this sense of the Leviathan for me was very interesting. And then when I came to this print, the next image, please, Ian, which is another plate from America, a prophecy, and this is the copy which is held by the Fitzwilliam. Very lucky enough to go and see it. What's that shape slumped on the floor? People have interpreted it as a tree, but I'm pretty sure that's a whale. I'm pretty sure that's a sea monster. And the reason why I would defend that idea is when Blake, for instance, was living in Lambeth, he was just a few streets away from a sperm whale manufactory where they were processing sperm whales. So the British whaling fleet, which was huge at that time, it was one of the preeminent whaling fleets in the world. London was a whaling port. Whales were being brought up to the Greenland dock. Down the Greenland dock is where approximately where the Millennium Dome was now. No, it's nearer. It's nearer than that. There was another processing plant further down, but very close to where in two places in Lambeth where chunks of whale were rendered down for their oil. Their oil was used lighting, street lighting, lubrication. Turner used spermaceti oil as a medium for his paintings. So Turner, famous for painting scenes of whaling, maybe was painting those using whale oil. But the big thing for, I don't know if any of you have ever encountered a dead whale. I probably hope you haven't, but you can smile, and it's not an exaggeration to say you can smile it from a mile away. I mean, it's such a powerful stink. That would have been in Blake's nostrils. He would have definitely have smelt that. So he'd been aware of whales. Also, living whales were coming up the Thames. In fact, a living whale, a fin whale, was harpooned, killed, and brought along to the embankment at Blackfriars Bridge and was being exhibited there in 1809, the same time as Blake was staging his first and only exhibition in his brother's sock shop in Soho, where the first picture that greeted you was Nelson guiding Leviathan. Given the power of the whale, the Leviathan in Paradise Lost, and given the power of Milton in Blake's imagination, I think these things do add up to something. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think they do. So I'm just going to jump on now to another aspect of what I do in the book, which might be vaguely new to people. So the next slide, please. Ian. And that's the person of W. Graham Robertson in this famous Sargent painting, son of a Scottish shipping magnate. When his father died in about 1880, I think it was, he inherited a vast fortune. And around that same time, he was in Southampton, which is where I'm talking to you from now, in a bookshop called Gilbert's, which until about 10 years ago was still there in Southampton. He walked in and he bought a copy of this book, which is Gilchrist's first biography of Blake. I don't know how much he knew about Blake at that point. He became obsessed. He became totally fascinated by Blake. And it's really down to him, down to that one person, that we have Blake's work in the National Collection. The greater majority of the holdings in Tate Britain and in the Fitzwilliam and in many national galleries, because when he died, Graham Robertson had willed the work to these galleries, came from the collections that Graham Robertson made. And it's a very interesting connection because Graham Robertson was an intimate friend, possibly lover, of Oscar Wilde. Wilde told Robertson, who had been dancing for Oscar, told him not to read the portrait of Dorian Gray. I think you can see why from this picture. It's kind of interesting. And it's interesting to set that against the first picture that Robertson acquired for 15 guineas, which was the ghost of a flea. And the theatricality of the ghost of the flea is really interesting. It could be a scene from a Russian ballet of the early 20th century. And also we know now, it's a very science fictional image that appears continually in science fiction and the films and in the imagination, this keratinous, insect-like Nosferatu creature holding a bowl in which to catch the blood of his victim. The most disgusting part of this beautiful image is the way he holds his tail pinched in his claws. And yet, there's a comet falling in the sky, which makes us think about John Milton falling from the sky. And there's stars, and there's a theatrical frame to the image. It's a very queer image in many ways. It ties in with what Robertson and people like Robbie Ross, and other people are exhibiting at the Carfax Gallery at the end of the 19th, early part of the 20th century, which is where Robertson, having bought most of the really key pieces, Blake pieces, from Thomas Butts's descendant, Captain Butts, who was living down in Poole Harbour in a house where he's built an extension to house the Blake collection. This incredible, I mean, he has 20 of the colour prints, pretty much all of the colour prints that we know of. This guy, he's removed very much from Thomas Butts, his ancestor who collected those or bought those pieces from Blake. But he's aware of their power, as is his daughter, Mary Butts, who becomes a great modernist poet, friend and lover of Aleister Crowley, Jean Cocteau, Man Ray. You start to see the way Blake goes into the modernist canon. It's very, very interesting. That's the way he goes in. And it's from a very cryptic angle. And you think that it's Yeats who first publishes Blake's poems and circulates this rumor that Blake is Irish, that his father was Irish. Because to Yeats, you can't be a visionary poet and not be Irish, basically. And then Yeats's connection with all sorts of things is the way that Blake, it's almost as though he didn't die. When I was writing my book, I felt I was writing the biography of a 297-year-old man who was still alive in many ways. The way he pops up everywhere. Next image, please, Ian. This is one of book. This is one of Graham Robertson's illustrations for Algernon Blackwood's ghost stories in the early part of the century. It's these really, really beautiful images, very Blakean, but almost sort of futurist as well, in a strange way. Really beautiful. And that Robertson, by showing those, he really stages the first major Blake show of the 20th century. It's like a big statement. It shows all the colour prints. Robbie Ross owns the Carfax Gallery at that moment. And next slide, please. And that's where a young Paul Nash walks in and sees this painting, which is Blake's Pity. A very I was lucky enough to go and see these colour prints in the Tate Britain's archive in South London, and to see them laid before me, sort of as Blake would have made them. Pictures go on the wall, but when you see them in front of you, you see them from the dynamic, from which the angle from which they are made. The connection of looking down. And obviously having it to myself, although I was surrounded by security, and to see the texture of it as well, the way the rain is scratched out with his paintbrush, and that it's neither print nor painting. It's almost psychic, the way it's created and the texture. When Rossetti saw these images, especially the image of Newton sitting on that rock at the bottom of the sea, the benthic abyss, he could only liken them to photographs. I think he was thinking of Anne Atkins' cyanotypes of seaweed, the same textures. There's a sort of, and it was like that in the beginning image, the God creating Adam at the beginning, the seabed that he's lying on. Blake imagines coral reefs and seabeds, which he could never have seen, but they are like that. It's a really beautiful thing. But Paul Nash is haunted by this image. And so next slide, please, Ian. When he buys his first camera, he photographs this field, which he calls Monster Field. And this felled, lightning-struck tree becomes the horses. He sees it as the horses in Pity have crashed to the ground. And it's a kind of the way that a lot of the modernists dealt with mediumship, with psychic phenomena, the way photography has always had that power. You think of spirit photography, and that's evident in Nash's work. And of course, Nash is in Dorset, right by where Blake Jarman's film was made. The Low Tide was made at Winspit on the Isle of Purbeck. Next slide, please, Ian. Which is where he conducts this extraordinary love affair with Eileen Agar, who creates herself as, next slide, please, a Blakean image, as a kind of sea creature, a subaquatic goddess, starfish, piece of zooplankton, amoeba. She's surrounded in cellophane, which she's painted with starfish and things. It's the most extraordinary image. It's such a beautiful image. And so, next slide, please. And just towards the end of this bit of my presentation, sort of another incarnation of Blake, which is via his life mask, which is as near as we can get now to a photograph of Blake. It's amazing. If Blake had only lived 10 years more, we could have probably had a photograph of him, but he didn't. But this is obviously his life mask. And you notice the splash of pink on the cheek, because this life mask belonged to this person. Next image, please. Who is Francis Bacon, who painted the life mask of Blake, again as almost an ectoplasmic image, a very haunting image. And I think of Bacon, who once gave me the glad eye on the bus into Soho, with Derek Jarman in Soho, in the same streets that Blake walked. Do you know? It's a time shift. It's a very interesting thing. So I'm just going to finish my last images. So next image, please, Ian. Which is Blake as a young man, drawn by Catherine. Flaming red hair, bright blue eyes. And you can see why some people have thought, and people certainly Yates thought, there was Irish in him. There's something really magnificent about that image. It's however imagined it is. It segues into the next image, please, Ian. And the next image. And yeah, so that's really how I sort of come up to date with Blake. And then, so the last image, please, Ian. Thanks. So we can keep that as a holding image, or where it'll be John and I up on screen now. Thanks.
Thanks, Philip. That's terrific. Shall we make us big? I always feel like it's a bit weird when
Oh
we're
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No,
tiny
visual image.
people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, sure.
That's fantastic. And like in a sort of capsule form, quite similar to the book, which is just this kind of in the best sense, sort of sprawling and sometimes bewildering kind of maelstrom of stuff. I'm going to work my way round to asking you a question in a mo, but if I could just wax lyrical about the book for a little bit. So there it is. It really is an extraordinary thing and an absolute Leviathan itself, as you can all see. You should always judge a book by its cover, right? And I absolutely love the cover.
I'm really pleased. I love
It's
the cover.
it's really good. I mean, I love it. And it's really interesting. I think that when I went to the back and looked at the credits and realised that as you mentioned in your presentation, the depiction of Leviathan here from Job is John Linnell after William Blake, and the book definitely doesn't need another title because it's got such a good one. But I almost feel like a subtitle to the book could be After Blake or After William Blake. Because I feel like one of the things it is this amazing to mix my natural metaphors, almost a sort of spider's web of all these incredible characters who've responded to Blake and been inspired by him and had sort of used him as rocket fuel. Do you mind if I just read a list that I assembled of
Yeah. Can
not
I
all, but many of
just
them?
before I do, because I was
Yeah, yeah.
promising to say about the title and you've just given a
Yes.
little, because I only realized that someone said to me today, a friend of mine said, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I
Yeah.
didn't even think that.
So
I
I was
never
going
even,
to see
but you just
this.
said spiders, which made me think about it. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so
Well, I want to come on to that as well, but yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And that
yeah.
sort of, I made that connection quite late as
Yeah,
well.
that's it.
Yeah. But this is a sort of list that I assembled of
Yeah.
the other people apart from Blake the book is about, and this is by no means exhaustive, but just to give people an idea. Here we go. Derek Jarman, Paul Nash, Oscar Wilde, Robbie Ross, W. Graham Robertson, Algernon Blackwood, W.B. Yeats, Jacob Bronowski, Gerard Manley Hopkins, John Milton, Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, obviously, Herman Melville, more whale stuff, James Joyce, Dante and Michael
Mm.
Rossetti, the Chevalier d'Eon,
Yeah.
Anne Gilchrist, Jeffrey Keynes, Stephen Tennant, Stephen Spender, Eileen Agar, Mary Butts, Anthony Butts, Frederick Butts, Iris Murdoch, Francis Bacon, John Banting, Nancy Cunard, Brian Howard, Langston Hughes, T.E. Lawrence, and indeed David Bowie.
It's my
Um,
ideal cocktail party.
yeah, well, quite. I mean, it sort of blew my mind. And some of those, I would say about half of those names were familiar to me, or I
Mm,
knew something about these people. But
mm,
but some of those were completely new to me.
mm.
And yeah, it's I find it slightly hard to know what to ask you first or how to find a way in because the
Alan
book is
Ginsberg.
so sort of
Allen Ginsberg is in the book. In the book. Sorry, we just had a message from
oh,
Camilla.
Allen Ginsberg. Yeah, he
Yep.
does get a mention.
Yep.
Yeah, although he's
Yep.
well,
He's
this
not
was not going to
big
be my
because
first
he
question.
sits on Blake quite a lot. I sort of just
Yeah.
slightly want to dislodge him a little bit, only because whatever. But he is brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
no, he's
okay,
brilliant.
this maybe gives me a way in because I
Mm,
think one of the things that I found really sort of stimulating about the book
mm,
was that it's not the sort of context that perhaps I'm used to seeing Blake in. And
mm.
Ginsberg, for example, as our trustee, the wonderful Camilla mentions,
Yeah.
is yeah, like you think of Ginsberg and the Beats, they're sort of
Mm, mm,
often held up as his sort of
mm,
20th
mm,
century
mm. Yeah.
countercultural inheritors, right?
Mm, mm.
But I'm not so used to seeing him in the company of the yeah sort of fin de siècle decadence
Yeah.
and then modernist artists and
Yeah.
avant-garde artists
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sort of surrealists.
Mm, mm.
Um, so I suppose my question is, what do you think it is about Blake that sort of fed into those kinds of artists and
Well, it's
fed them?
like that comment from Dante Gabriel Rossetti when he compared Blake's images to a photograph. Well, photography wasn't even photography at that point. I mean, Rossetti was making a very modernistic gesture by calling something, likening something to a photograph. This is like
Mm,
likening something to from the future. Blake is from the future. I mean, Timothy Morton, great ecologist, he says all art is from the future. And this idea that Blake, I suppose it's partly because I've written a lot about Herman Melville. And Melville, a modernist writer, he was born in 1819. He was born in Blake's lifetime.
mm,
But he wasn't discovered until after I mean, no one knew who he was when he died in 1891. No one had read Moby Dick. It hadn't even sold out its first edition. But suddenly he becomes this extraordinary person who Virginia Woolf reads Moby Dick 3 times. She says, all my people from the future won't believe that all my work is inspired by the sight of a distant fin passing out at sea. So the way that Melville is very Blakean too. There's some really interesting connections between Melville, Moby Dick, but especially Billy Budd and Blake. This sense that, so what is an artist? So, okay, so can we even call Blake an artist of his time? Because if you think only 61 people bought copies of those books. So, it's, can an artist be said to be an artist of that time when the percentage of people who've seen them is that full? And then like
mm.
now, that's it. So it's that sense of art is immortal in a way. Blake's prints were physically immortal because Catherine carried on printing them after he died, and we're still taking instructions from him the way he took instructions from his brother Robert, his dead brother Robert. So that sense of the seance, the art, Auden said that art is a seance with the dead. It's a so that's one reason I think. I think the other reason was because Blake was like Andy Warhol, like Albert Dürer, Blake was a commercial artist.
Mm.
And so he had that. There's nothing between us and Blake. He puts his art is right there. There's not a layer of connoisseurship or academic or intellectual. Blake is intellectual in his way, but so there's no. It's art made to be communicated. It's why the bounding line is so important. The bounding line was so important to Dürer. Bounding line is so important to Andy Warhol and modern artists. Art means mechanical means reproduction, that, and so his art. I love the idea that he wanted to make 100-foot high image, like the angel of the north, the
Yeah.
angel of the south, to stand outside London. So all his ideas go beyond his time. Everything that he thinks about is beyond his time. That's why no one, everyone thinks he's mad. It's yeah, that's not
There's
really an
sort of
answer to your question,
well, no,
but
that's why there's interesting like parallels as well with as well as Melville, Gerard Manley Hopkins, right? Whose
yeah.
work like literally sits in a drawer for I can't remember how long until someone.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
it was Manley Hopkins. I started out writing.
Ah, right.
I wrote 150,000 words about um, Samuel um, Gerald Manley
Hopkins.
Hopkins,
Yeah.
and I realised, well, it's number one, he has such a sad life. He is like an anti-Blake in that way because Blake dies, to our eyes anyway, a contented person. I think he
Mm.
realizes what he's done. Hopkins, likewise, unpublished in his lifetime, has a very sad end in Dublin, where he's been sent by the Jesuits. But when I was doing my research on Hopkins, I was reading his notebooks. I got to see Blake's notebook, which is the most momentous part of my research. I was to open that book like his brain, but to open
Mm.
up Hopkins's book, where the writing gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you realise he's being squeezed out uh, 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 of his rightful place
Yeah.
in artist. And then in his book of sins, which I
Yeah.
consulted in Campion Hall, he has the list of sins that he's committed, looking at choristers, looking at men on the towpath, looking at Blake.
Mm.
And it's his sin. I thought, and I realised that's where I had to go.
And he
That was,
crosses them out, right?
yeah,
It's
and he
so
crosses
the
them out. Yeah,
denial, it's horror. And
yeah,
I don't know an awful lot about Hopkins, so I don't want to make crass comparisons that might be wrong,
no.
but that difference in that relationship
Mm.
to religion and spirituality, right? That for Blake is all
Oh yeah. Mm, mm,
and
mm,
the
mm,
sort
mm,
of
mm,
that
mm,
seems to be sort
mm,
of
yeah.
crushing Hopkins is the idea of
Yeah, but you
guilt and
see,
feelings of
but,
guilt.
but Hopkins is in the same building that well, Hopkins is at the Clongowes Wood, which is where James Joyce is sent to
Mm.
school, which is where the portrait of the artist as a young man is written. And then Joyce goes to the university there at Hopkins taught. Joyce is in the same room as Hopkins's manuscripts, and Joyce is shown Blake's work by Yeats and is given this. And as far as Joyce is concerned, Blake is Irish.
Yeah.
And so when he writes Ulysses, he uses Leopold Bloom and Leopold and Molly Bloom as William and Catherine Blake. They are directly based on them.
Yeah.
Uh, Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake are full of Blake.
I was like sort of leafing through your book today, like reminding myself the passages, and I was particularly pleased to see that Philip Astley, I think I'm right in saying, who was the ringmaster of the circus in Lambeth when the Blakes lived in Lambeth,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who Blake apparently had an altercation with, and that Astley and indeed is it Jacko the monkey, the horse
Yeah,
riding
they're
monkey
performing. Yeah, yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
who the artist Cosway used to get compared to.
Oh, did they? All right, yeah.
Apparently, yeah, there was this sort of. I think that's one of the running jokes in An Island on the Moon is that
Oh,
Jacko, the
okay,
artist,
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
but what I was so delighted by was that a couple of years ago now we went along to members of the Blake Society got invited to go along to this amazing art event that these curators who were just like two people, a couple who live in one of the flats in the block of flats in Lambeth where
Oh, Hercules
Hercules
building
Wrote
stuff.
House
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah. And so they just invited people to do sort of Blake artworks, and I wrote this weird little thing that had me as a sort of Philip Astley and a mate of
Oh,
mine who's an actor as the ghost of a flea.
yeah.
Um, but that the friend of mine who I sort of bullied into playing the ghost of a flea is a James Joyce obsessive. So I was so delighted to see that Astley
Yeah,
gets a reference
yeah,
in Finnegan's
yeah.
Wake from your book.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's amazing. The Astley reference in Villains as well.
Yeah,
It's really extraordinary. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So one of the other things about a lot of these, the sort of inspiration trail, if you will, so a lot of these characters is how
Mm,
many of them, sort of artists and writers who you touch upon in the book are gay or bisexual.
mm,
And again, just I suppose in a really sort of painfully obvious sort of way, maybe we don't often think of Blake as a particularly sort of gay artist,
mm.
if only because, you know, at least in his sort of
Uh,
behavior, as far as we know of it, he
yeah,
seems to have been largely heterosexual. But
yeah.
so what do you think there's something in particular that appealed to sort of gay artists, particularly living in a time when, you know, they were very repressed and societally repressed, that is what's the connection
Well, duh. Sorry, but anyone who draws male thighs like Blake
there?
is, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that that makes him queer,
Yeah.
but if that's what sent Hopkins to the confessional. And
It's particularly the thigh.
they are the most erotic images of male bodies of the time and of any time really.
Yeah.
And he did draw sort of what you might construe as gay porn, huge penises on, you know, he did some pornography in that way. But
This is the stuff in Four Zoas that got rubbed out by
yes, exactly, exactly.
Tatum. And yeah.
But what's really interesting is we are so blessed that he was not born 50 years later,
Mm,
because he would have been assimilated into the Victorian. He'd probably been committed.
mm,
He had that looseness, and when you look at that period, the romantic, whatever you want to call it, romantic period or whatever, that period of art, it's so fluid. Sexuality is very much more fluid than you ought. We have so many, you know, until Oscar was branded, all that stuff is much more fluid. It's much more
mm,
fluid, much more fluid. And is hanging out with a trans person, the Chevalier de Leon, who lives just around the corner from him, and who is Mr. Formality in the
mm.
island, on the island of the
Right.
moon. But when you talk about artists and poets, the idea of like actors have to appeal physically, sexually to everyone.
Mm,
That's part of the connection. So an artist, if you start putting barriers up in a way, and I think that's what's so, I found Blake so healing. I was quite ill when I was writing the book, and I really found him physically healing by the way he depicts the human body. And it's idealized, and it's kind of too perfect in many ways. But what I like about it, it's almost like he builds his humans from component parts, as though he's got this box next to him with all these bits, and he puts them together in a really, it is an idealistic way. It's very modern. It's very
mm.
modern. They don't look anything like even Fuseli's images, who you might find the closest comparison. Fuseli looks just like of that period, but Blake just bursts out. And I think that's because of the commercial artist in him, the way he portrays them. They look modern because of that, because of the way they are reproduced. So when you're how many erotic images, if you're a gay person at that time, how many erotic images do you get? If you go to Soho, like, backstreet shops and so on, you just don't see them. So if you saw Blake's images, that would just be amazing. Of course, they wouldn't have done, because he wasn't in the
Mm.
currency like that. But who isn't queer? Who isn't queer? I mean, that's what I like about the word queer. It used to be a term of abuse.
Yeah.
But it's a very inclusive word, I think, and I think because Blake is so inclusive from a point of view of sexuality, his kind of amorphousness, you know,
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
sort of protean sort of thing, the
Mm,
which perhaps brings us to the sea as well. I've got to talk about the
mm,
sea because you're
mm,
clearly like
mm.
sea and whale obsessed.
Uh,
Um, and again, I always think of Blake as being such an urban poet, and obviously there's the fateful 3 years in Felpham. Um, but yeah, to really see him almost held up as a sea poet is really
mm.
interesting,
It is, isn't
and
it?
sort of slightly rejigged
Yeah.
it all for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because
do you think that is like something Felpham, the seeing the ocean, like literally seeing the ocean, did something to him? And
it's literally at the end of the road, and
yeah,
it's very close. You know, it's really close by. So he's really subject to the sea, and the
yeah,
sea changes the electricity of anything. You know, the negative ions, the flow of the sea. I mean, that energy it can drive you a bit mad.
Hmm.
I think it's driven me a bit mad. I was swimming at 2 o'clock this morning,
Well,
in the
I
black.
should I should say to everyone when we were organising this meeting, and
Uh,
I said to Philip, I was like 7:30, all right, and you were like, it's a bit late for me because what time do you get up in the morning to
well,
post pub?
2 o'clock often.
So
Otherwise,
thanks for
it
staying
depends
up
what
for
the
us.
tide is, but yeah. So I think the sea, you know, and of course people were thinking of the sea in a different way because of the whole sort of way that the romantics are looking at it, and because
Mm,
of the recreational thing as well. Um, but also because of his visions. He was walking on the shore with Muhammad and Jesus Christ and Milton. You know, he had a pony there, don't you? Bruno, his pony,
yeah.
beloved Bruno, who I imagine him going on the beach with, actually. I mean, you would walk the beach with the pony, I think, which he rode. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the sea is really present in a lot of Blake's work, you know, because it is the profundity, you know, it's the abyss. Um, you know, it's the sea is where pandemonium is located in Paradise Lost, you know. So it is the marriage of heaven and hell, you know, and it's where the Leviathan comes out of the water, isn't it? And you know, it's just like an image of it's the sea as outer space, it's the sea as 2001, you know, it's all those things really.
Sea of time and space.
Yeah, sea of time and
Yeah.
space, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
There's a quote which I wrote down because I thought it was so wonderful. If you don't mind me, I always think it's weird to like quote passages back to authors, but if you don't mind. There's a bit where you wrote about his time in Felpham. It says, Blake came here as an emissary to the Leviathan and the Polypus. He might as well emit sonar clicks from his great square head. And it got me thinking, and I was like, he does look a bit like a whale, doesn't
It
he? He
does.
actually, is it a sperm whale that have the weird
Yes.
square? I think it actually genuinely kind of looks
And
like a sperm whale.
yeah. And
Amazing.
I think he would have seen sperm whales. Sperm whales came up the Thames in his
Yeah.
lifetime, you know.
When
Um,
they lived in South Molton Street, they lived
mm,
above a corset shop, I think, which
right.
they were all made from
Whalebone.
like whale bones, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
some amazing bits
Mm,
in the book for everyone who should read it
mm,
about
mm,
where it
mm,
describes, yeah,
mm,
how sort of everywhere like
mm,
whale
mm,
stuff was in London,
mm,
how it was
mm.
sort of
Yeah,
processed.
yeah, you're right. It's part of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really an economic driver. I mean, and the same ships that were whaling were slaving.
Yeah.
There's adverts in the Times at the time, you know, suitable for whaling or the Africa trade, you
Wow.
know. So
Yeah.
there's a sense of this great extraction that's going on, you know, and also the other thing for me, Blake, who else said this stuff about animals? A dog starved at his master's
Mm.
gate predicts the ruin of the state. Fuck me. Excuse my language, but that, I mean, when I tell that to people, like when I've been giving talks, so I've been touring the book, as it were,
Mm.
it really strikes you because that seems so modern.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? It seems so, yeah, like
Yeah,
as you say, the sort of
yeah,
ecological, environmental
yeah,
concerns of
yeah.
today.
Uh,
Yeah.
he's speaking about this because he sees what's happening. You know, he sees.
And
I
the,
mean, in London, you will see that because there's, you know, all the elephant ivory being unloaded down in the
yeah.
docks, the way animals are treated. You know,
And it's the sort of joined upness of it all as well. I always
mm,
think like that's what I always love about, or one of the things I love about the poem London, the sort of joined up
yeah,
of it all. It's not just one
yeah, yeah,
thing, it's
yeah.
about everything, the whole. societal
Absolutely.
structure.
And then that becomes Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and the whole thing. That's why and there's another reason why Melville comes into the story there, and that's very heady, really. The notion of being prophetic, seeing that this cannot hold, you know, the
Yeah.
center cannot hold. That's really where I think, for me, Blake's power is so strong. You know, something really terrible happened last year. My nephew, who identifies as queer, and his partner, who's trans, went to one of those fascist demonstrations. It was the one in Plymouth, which was a particularly nasty one, and they were down there. My nephew's a poet, and the fascists, so I have to call them that, were chanting Jerusalem
Mm.
at the people, and my nephew's going like, "What part of that do you understand or
Yeah. Yeah.
not?" You
Yeah.
know, um, and
Spinning, Bunhill spinning. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that fact. I mean, everyone knows this story that when Robert Bridges, who was Jeremiah Hopkins's literary executor, commissioned Hubert Parry to write the music for Jerusalem, and then performed at this terrible jingoistic event at the
Mm.
Royal Albert Hall, Parry took the copyright away from him and gave it to the suffragettes. And the next
Yeah.
time it was played was at the Albert Hall for the Votes for Women in 1918.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should let other people. I've
Mm.
barely asked you
There's some
anything
really
that
good stuff
I
coming
was.
on the chat
But
show as
just
well.
before I let other people
Mm.
in, could you tell us just a bit more about W. Graham Robertson? Because
Yeah,
there was some of he's above all like the person in this book who I'd never
yeah,
heard of before,
no,
and like what an
he's
incredible
amazing.
character, and
He's
also how much we owe him.
yeah, we really do. The
Yeah.
great thing, so the big thing, having collected all this work, he doesn't sit in his house. He lends it free to galleries, free reproduction. You know, I'm going to moan a bit here now because for the pictures in my book, and six colored plates, I was charged £6,000 in reproduction fees for that, and you have to pay that as a writer yourself.
Yeah.
Um, that's your advance gone basically by
Yeah.
modern galleries. You know, these people who have no connection with Blake, and I know they're preserving the work and everything, but Graham Watson was physically, so he was Blake's agent. He was Blake's angel. He was his angel in many ways, you know. And and this beautiful scene at the start of the Second World War, he knows that so he's already told the Tate he's going to give them stuff, but he says, "You've got to have this now because the bombs are coming."
Mm.
And so the goat work goes into the, and it goes directly into hiding into those Welsh caverns, you know. The King, George V, up to say goodbye to them.
Mm.
It's an amazing thing. But so all along the way, he is and he makes no, he doesn't make a reputation for himself out of this, you know. He's living in this amazing house in Surrey where there's no electricity,
Yeah.
no running water, no gas, no cars. He's living, and Henry James complains of being sent candle stuck to bed when he goes to stay with him. But yeah, Robertson, he's a really wonderful queer figure. He's a queer hero. He really is, you know. He is just, and yeah, he is really my hero, you know.
He's absolutely. I mean, if any, yeah, if there's a hero of the book, I would say it's him. And I
No,
love
he
the
is.
connection with the Buttses as well. I
Yeah,
think you described. So is it in the Saltern? Was that the name of the house
yeah, it
that
was
the Buttses had?
yeah,
And
down on Poole
they
Harbour.
built a wing for the Blakes
Yeah,
basically.
it's
Um,
fantastic.
and then
Three-story wing.
Robertson came and like bought all this stuff off them, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think you describe at one point the Saltern, the Blake extension,
yeah,
as it were, as
yeah,
like ground zero
yeah.
for modern Blake, which is amazing.
It really is because a lot of Blake stuff just rotted away in attics.
Yeah.
You know, the Blake work that Catherine inherited, which is basically all of it, a lot, because that was Frederick Tatham, wasn't it? And
Mm,
then I mean, he destroyed a lot, didn't he? Well, a lot
mm,
was destroyed.
yeah.
So it just got into the wrong hands. What would have happened if Graham Robinson had come along? You know, you needed someone with a fucking load, excuse my language, but I needed someone with a lot of money.
Yeah.
Not that it was expensive, you know, but you needed someone to support that, you know, because he could have bought it and then just kept it in his own house and never
Yeah.
shown it to
Well,
anyone.
exactly. So presumably you sort of need to be like well off to be that sort of selfless with it.
Yeah, yeah.
to not, like you
yeah.
say, to be doing it for your own, you know, if you're
Yeah.
already rich.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. No, no, no.
yeah.
He's such a, yeah, he's a gentle soul.
Yeah,
I,
him
I
and
could,
a shout out to Mary Butts as well, who's also a
absolutely.
fantastic.
She's so cool. She's
Yeah,
so cool. She's so radical, you know. I mean, she's just like, and she's there. She's like the Zelig of modernism. She just pops up everywhere. And she's just, you know, yeah. And she dies young as
yeah.
well.
But we're leaving quite a few novels and collections of short stories
Yeah,
behind.
yeah.
To check
Really,
some of
really
those out.
interesting. Really
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, she's really haunted by Blake. She really feels him. She in her, as it were. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Right. I think we've got like half an hour left, so I
Yeah.
think we should open it up to Q&A. There's loads of chat going on, which I
Yeah,
barely had a
yeah,
chance
yeah.
to
Some
look
really
at.
good stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to turn your cameras on, people, if you want to, and raise a hand
Mm.
if you have a question, and we'll take the questions, and then perhaps we'll try and look at some of the stuff in the chat as well. So the
Mm.
first hand I can see is I'm going to pronounce everyone's name wrong. Sorry, Dayan Kim. Is that something approaching right?
Right.
I would say that was quite close. You can just
Good.
call me Dawn.
Okay.
Well, thank you for this fascinating talk about Blake and sea monsters. Like, at the beginning, like when I was like registering for the meeting, I was like trying to remind me of any sea monsters that I've seen in Blake's works. I think when it comes to the earliest, I just I couldn't help but like going back to the early Laocoon of Blake
Yes,
because
yes, yes. Mm.
it looks like just snake, but actually,
Mm.
according to the Laocoon myth, they
Yes.
are like Laocoon and his two sons are almost unanimously in all kind of versions of myth. They're attacked by sea monsters.
Yeah,
Like so,
yeah.
someone say Athena sent them, someone say
Mm.
like Poseidon
Mm.
sent
Mm.
them. So I
Mm.
think like so obviously his version of Laocoon is more about the Hebraic art.
Mm.
But now
Mm.
after the presentation, I began to think of all his like engraved text around the
Mm.
whole
Mm.
page
Mm.
as a
Mm.
kind of a sea, as a kind of that
Mm.
space
Mm.
underneath the water,
Mm. Mm.
where the god and
Mm. Mm. Mm.
the two figures are like fighting between the good and evil.
Mm.
And I was also like thinking when you guys were like discussing whether Blake is like the artist of the time, like does
Mm.
he really belong to the romantic era even
Mm.
if nobody has seen this? I that was like one of my like central questions as well because I'm like I am thinking of a project that will mostly deal with his late works and his late friendships. That's my project. Um,
Ah,
but like so I recently read this book. I think it's very famous, Counter Arts Conspiracy by Morris Eves. And he really let him understand that Blake was indeed always beyond his time, but also a man of his time. And I just wanted to show you this quick image. I cannot share the screen. It's
Yeah, I
Steam
don't
Strike, so
think you'll be able to,
I
unfortunately.
just sent it through the chat,
Great.
through the chat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So this is
Oh yeah,
this
yeah,
is one of the paintings that was exhibited at Blake's own
yeah,
exhibition,
yeah, yeah.
which was a grand failure. But
Mm.
still, this is considered as a historical painting for
Mm.
Blake,
Mm.
which is amazing because like everyone's naked, and this
Mm.
General Nelson is fighting the sea monster, which is Leviathan. He
Mm.
calls it Leviathan.
Mm.
So I was just like, I wanted to see what you would think of how Blake combines his very contemporary wave of British nationalism and the sea monster,
Mm.
and also like we talked about like sea monsters in the sea
Mm.
usually in this
Mm.
talk.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I was like also wondering, like the Laocoon, what would happen when the
Mm.
sea monsters get out of the ocean?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
a
Well, we
couple of
just want them
images
to.
that I
Yeah,
wanted to share and like a
yeah,
couple of just
yeah.
justing questions about it.
Well, when that was shown, and there was one of the first pictures you saw apparently when you came into his brother's sock shop, the room above it, and at the exact same time, where he was painting that, there was a whale. I think I said a whale uh, was harpooned and brought alongside the London dockside, the canal, the riverside. So there's physically a leviathan there, and but there's a whole symbolism of the empire, the burgeoning empire, and the Leviathan as well. It's probably too much to go into now, but I do discuss exactly what you're talking about in the book, about that image, and Ruskin makes some really interesting comments about. In fact, at one point, he compares Queen Victoria to a sea monster. But anyway, I won't go to but that's there. Yeah, Ruskin's really good on this stuff as well. Ruskin's really good on Blake, of course. Yeah, he brings all that in. But
Yeah, yeah.
That's really great opening up of it. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dom. Could we have Jodie, please?
Okay, no, my camera's not really working very well, so I'll just talk at you. But so thank you for that talk. That was it didn't necessarily like it kind of went deeper into your book rather than like explaining it. And I am unfortunately going to ask some very basic questions and observation because I have the interesting task of reviewing this for an academic journal, and it's distinctly a very not anti-academic book, but definitely one that is more kind of like it transcends many kind of forms even. So I'm going to start with, I was interested in how you said the book kind of Blake took over the book almost, and the book was going to be about something else. So my question was kind of what was the book originally going to be, and what kind of audience was the book for? Like, because it seems to be like you drop in like loads and loads of like detail and like hints and things about various people. So like with Mary Butts, for example, who I adore, as someone that works on Blake and the occult, Mary Butts and the wickedest man in the world, you didn't actually name Crowley, you would have to know who that was. So you drop loads of little insider things like that. So yeah, audience, genesis of the book, and I also, correct me if I'm wrong, or if this is something that you don't agree with, but as I was reading it, again, given my background, it was almost as if Blake himself, as a spiritual force, was possessing you and the book, writing it. Like, could you potentially like read it that way? Just questions you don't, like they're very open-ended, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about them.
Yes, to your last question.
Yeah.
Definitely yes.
Okay, yes.
But,
straightforward, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and yeah, it's definitely it is an anti-academic book.
Yeah.
Because there's been so much academic stuff written about him, and it's like so when I write stuff about Wales and I go and talk, I write about Wales for the Guardian. I'm the Whale correspondent, I think. I'm on the Rolodex, Wales, Philip Hoare. It's a very niche thing. But I go to talk to scientists about Wales, and they're completely mind blown about Wales, and they can't express it, and they're not allowed to express it. They're not allowed to say what they want to say about Wales.
Okay.
And that's what I saw about my job with Blake, to say things and talk about him in the way that you can't if you're referencing everything, if you're putting, I don't know if you notice there are no quotation marks in the book.
Yeah, and there's no index either.
There's no index. There's no source notes.
I love Blake. I have a lot of friends outside of academia who love Blake, and I find their kind of stuff sometimes more enlightening on Blake just because they're not like constrained by needing to cite things. But I will say, I think an index would have been a bit helpful. But yeah, I agree with it's an anti-academic book, and not every book about Blake has to be academic, and in fact that kind of constrains him in a way.
Yeah, I think so. And you got Google. You can find anything now. You don't need it, everyone, But so I mean, but that's not me abandoning. I mean, I'm sort of an academic. I taught I've left now, but I taught Southampton Uni. But yeah, all the things you say, yes, that's exactly right. I'm not, yeah, your apprehensions are correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad.
And the book that I was writing was about Manley Hopkins.
Ah, okay. No,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That makes sense because then a whole flood of other people come in as well.
Mm.
So it's not just, I mean, Blake seems to be like an animating spirit of it almost, but then you've got everyone else just kind of feeds in and it becomes a whole kind of like a cosmic dinner party situation.
Totally. It's like Nancy Cunard, her relationship to Blake is quite tentative, though it's there.
Okay.
But it's just, I bloody love her. She's so amazing. She's so radical. She's like Mary Barth. She's so radical. She's dismissed because she is rich. Although she'd spent all the money by the time she came back on the Empire Windrush. Came back on the Windrush from Jamaica.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's really interesting. She's so interesting, and she was a really good way of talking about race with Blake as well. In her in her work with sort of black culture, which anyway. But it's I think it's just they are all the people I've always really loved in my life, and they just seem to be how can you not love Blake? How can you not love him? It's just, how can you not? It's just, so it's just an excuse for some just.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodie. Cheers.
I think if I can butt in for a minute, Mary butts in. One of the things that I think the book does really well as well is, so in a sense, my sort of questions earlier about what was it that these guys got out of Blake is a bit sort of unfair because it's almost asking you to describe what is impossible to describe. And I think the book sort of cumulatively does a really good job of doing that. And I think it's some of my favorite writing that I've read about like what Blake does to a nervous system, like what reading Blake, like some of the really like big trippy stuff or like looking at some of his paintings. It's really beautiful sort of description of like poetic in its own right description of what that does. Very briefly as well, my mum got a copy of this book, which she really enjoyed because the publishers, bless them, ended up sending me like 3 copies because the post round my way is so bad.
Excellent.
And by the time I sort of got the post unblocked, I had 3 copies. So mum got
Excellent.
one. Really enjoyed it. She used to work as a professional indexer. So she was slightly dismayed, but we talked about it yesterday and she got it. She was like, I get why. I get it.
Yeah. You just don't need that support. You don't need that. You don't need to do that. When you're going through the book, I want you to be just stay in the story. Don't look at stuff at the back. It's like the pictures are at the back, or they are in the American edition. They aren't. They're in the Splendor. But it's just like keeping all that stuff. Like there's no, Like Noel Coward said, footnotes are like coitus interruptus.
Yeah, I think if you're like Jodie, writing a review, or like me, so preparing to meet the author, an index would be good. But I totally get it. I think it's like you have to sort of just, again, a bit like some of the, particularly the longer sort of Blake poems, you just have to sort of go for it and just get stuck in and just sort of absorb it. And I think an index would sort of detract from that. Aaron has been waiting really patiently. Aaron, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I think the image of Hopkins regarding Blake's thighs is gonna stick with me. I have a sort of a brief question. In the biblical tradition, theological tradition, in the poetic tradition of the West, the sea is a bad thing. Book of Revelation, the sea goes away and it's replaced by sweet water, right? Salt water is gone. Drinkable, potable water is in the 4 rivers of Eden, which come with the New Jerusalem. I'm trying to think, of the end of Jerusalem or the end of some of the epics, the apocalyptic moments. Does the sea disappear in Blake, or does it remain? Does it get transformed? How does it? Obviously, he's so heretical, in his workings of the theological tradition. But how does he treat the sea in the end?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I was only just sensing that, I was sensing it by the way he animates the sea, by the fluidity of the work. It flows, the flow of the work. Everything looks as though it can be under the water or in the air. You know, things are not really held. So that sense of being suspended or not, you know, elementally sort of fluid. That's just something I sense. You know, I'm not. When you think the way the sea is in Paradise Lost, and you know the power of that on him, you know, like in the marriage of heaven and hell, when he's being led by the angel through the earth into this place where he encounters the Leviathan. You know, but that's the sea becomes completely the other, doesn't it? It's just the other. I don't know whether he even swam. I mean, his patron William Haley, who he had to attend and whatever, had a very strong belief in the therapeutic power of sea bathing. So I can't believe that William Haley didn't make him get in the water. But there's no blame. But there's very little sort of chapter and verse from Blake anyway, is there, for his life, for what he did.
Yeah.
So we don't know what his relationship was. Did he swim in the sea? That's an interesting thing for me to think about. But yeah, so I can't answer that because I'm not au fait enough with the whole Blake literary canon to give you
I'll have to do my homework. I'll report back.
Yeah, I'd love to know. I mean,
Hey.
I just sense that that's there and that is a powerful thing. You know, the Thames is the sea. You know, and it was unembanked at that point, so there was proper seashore there. You are not disconnected now. You are completely disconnected from the Thames in London. You know, then you just were not. That was the way you travelled. You know,
Salt water or brackish water?
it's both. It's both. Salt water comes up, so that's why you have seals come there. You have cormorants. You know, you have sea animals. You know, you have various other animals which would, you know, and so it's an ambivalent place as well. You know, it's a place where even whales still occasionally appear in the Thames. You know, they shouldn't be there, but
Yeah.
But yeah, and he was, you know, Lambeth. He was right there. He was right by the sea as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
No, thank you for your comments. Thank you.
I can't remember whether the sea sort of features much at the end of like Jerusalem, for example. I can't remember. There's the whole weird bit at the very end where it's about the sort of inanimate rocks and stuff also being alive. But I can't remember
in Jerusalem, yeah, and in Milton, you know, the polyps and
yeah, the polypus, yeah.
And what's the like the kraken like monster that appears as well. There's a kraken. What's it called? I can't remember what its name is now. Yeah, but there's that appears. They're very powerful. They definitely are there. Those sort of monsters.
There's that very late painting as well, the Sea of Time and Space, which
it's in Devon, isn't it, somewhere? That is I haven't seen that. I'd love to go and see that. It's yeah, that's one of the few things which is really devoted to the sea, as it were. It's an image.
Yeah.
It's my friend John Gullett.
John Gullett has a question. John,
hello,
would you
John.
like to come on screen?
Hi. So it was a great talk, and it was fascinating to see the things that your audience came up with. What I felt about this book and your other books is that it seems like you're introducing your readership, you're introducing us to your friends. And I think there can't be a greater joy than sharing your friends with one another. And then my son Johnny said to me, you know, Johnny,
Yeah.
you know, he said, it must be a wonderful thing to have for friends people who are determined to see the beauty in the world.
I think that's a lovely thing to say. Thank you, John. I think that's true as well. The great thing about being artists like Blake is that you just have the license to have that as an ambition, to see the beauty in the world. That's what he does, you know. That's absolutely what he does, and I think he is so healing. That's why I found him when I was ill. There was a physical power of positivity about him because he's not cynical. He's not cynical at all. And as I say, the game thing where there's no barrier between me and him, us and him. You know, it's art it draws you in. It's not being put on a wall. So the thing is also, you know, I mean, his work wasn't that much exhibited, so we don't know, you know, but there's no sense in which you are being asked to make a critical judgment about it in a way. It's very, very generous. It's very generous. It just pours out of him. He's opening a door. It's the doors of perception. He is opening stuff up. He's not closing down. That's why I think the thing about queer thing, he's not closing down stuff. He would not close down anyone in a way.
It's a lot like Philip Hoare.
Thank you, John. John is my great friend from Provincetown in Cape Cod.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, John.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a great talk.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
There's that really lovely one of the proverbs of hell in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which no doubt I'm going to mangle now. But you know, among all the sort of like deliberately provocative sort of like mind-bending proverbs, there's the one which just says something like the spider a web, the bird a nest, man friendship, which is just so lovely. And that idea, like the other John has just said, it's like your book is almost a sort of map of these people.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And you know, that's why my last two books have been about art, because in these times, in quote marks, I think art is really, really important. I think it has a therapeutic power and a restorative power, you know, and it's one of the few things you can hang on to, I hope. Especially, you know, anyway, whatever. But
there's too much stuff in the chat. I've barely been able to really sort of
it's so nice, lovely things.
Lovely stuff going on. We should wrap up fairly soon. So if there are any more questions, please do raise your hand. I won't forgive myself if I don't ask you about, because I'm almost as obsessed with Bowie as I am with Blake. By my counting, there are about 40 sort of lyrical little references to Blake all the way through, and then to Bowie all the way through, and then he gets his sort of moment at the end. I've never really been able, to my frustration, to make much of a connection between the two, because it feels like they should be connected, but you obviously feel like they are very much so. What's your Bowie Blake take?
It's just there, I think. I make, very end of the book, I make clear what I think the concrete ones are, most specifically about the Man of Felpham and the way he sings Jerusalem then in a very in a purposely faltering voice. It's such a beautiful thing. And then he quotes Blake a number of times, but of course he's being directed by Roeg, who I met actually and talked to him about before he died. But Roeg, total Blakean, you know.
Really? That makes sense.
Yeah. But there's lots of other little things which, you know, I can't definitely say this is why he's saying that, but I feel it. And you know, he is a child of the 60s. He's, you know, he would be reading International Times when Blake appears in the International Times all the time. He says all the time. And then Burroughs does. And then, of course, Bowie links into Burroughs. And Bowie is playing Burroughs in The Men Who Fell to Earth, the Trilby. But Burroughs has appeared, you know, talking about Blake in the International Times, and then talking about himself as a kind of Man Who Fell to Earth character. There's a photograph of him in the 1960s. And then that's what that's the image that Bowie uses in The Man Who Fell to Earth. I think he is a Blakean figure in that. and I think his fate in the film as Thomas Jerome Newton, as this
Newton as well, right?
genius who is, you know, and then is sort of maltreated by the state and whatever. But yeah, I think the fact that he's called Newton is not a coincidence. But yeah, but if you're not if you're not a Bowie freak like we are, you might not find these things very interesting. I do, and Bowie. I never name him in the book either. I don't name my last two. He's appeared in my last two books about Albert Dürer and an earlier book as well. But yeah, he does he haunts me as well. So
yeah. Right, I think we just got time for the wonderful Kerry, who would like to ask a question. Please go ahead, Kerry. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Kerry. Oh, Kerry, you're still on mute.
there they are. You're mute.
You've got the book. It's
Yeah,
good. There you go.
Third of the way through the book, and what struck me is this Blake and the sea, and the importance that I'd never properly appreciated of the Felpham years, of that direct experience of the sea. The story I want to tell is about Desiree Hurst. I don't know if anybody here remembers Desiree Hurst. Very fine Blake scholar, somewhat eccentric, but then aren't we all? She was a lecturer at Swansea University for many, many years. If you know Swansea, it's raised on a hill overlooking Swansea Bay. So Desiree used to come to work walking along the beach. On one occasion, she was walking along the beach and she saw William Blake out in the waves, beckoning to her.
Wow.
So when Blake beckons to you, you go. So she walked into the waves, and then the vision faded, and she remembered she had to give a lecture. So
wow, I love it.
So she was always prompt at her lectures. So she walked into the lecture theatre, soaking wet. She explained to her students what had happened, very matter-of-factly. I saw William Blake. And then straight into her lecture. That's it. That's Desiree.
I love that.
Only
Thank
met
you,
her
Kerry.
a couple of times.
That's such an amazing image. I love it.
Yeah.
That's so
Yes. So you can
wonderful.
be a distinguished academic and you can see William Blake calling you. That's it. Okay.
Says it all for me. That's fantastic. Girl, that's going to stay with me. Thank you.
That's wonderful. I don't think we can beat that.
No, you really
That's
can't.
the point to finish proceedings. Apart from that, thank you so much, Philip, for joining us. It's been great.
That has been the best fun.
Oh, good.
And I was this is the gig that I've been most nervous about. I've really been nervous about it. I was telling my publishers, I can't, they'll take me apart. So thank you for not taking me apart.
Not at all. I like to think this is the great thing about the Blake Society, that there are like scholars and experts, but it's ultimately we're all sort of enthusiasts for Blake in one way or another.
I can tell you're all nice people. How could you not be?
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to Philip again. And reluctantly, I'll say good night.
Yeah, thanks all. Thanks so much.